For this to work, the Russians had to train a dog like Shadow to pull the doggy chew and release the bomb.
It's called shaping. When he looks at the string, you give him a reinforcement. You keep doing that. And then he eventually will touch his mouth to the string. And then eventually he'll pull it.
It was an ambitious plan. Shadow would have to release the bomb at exactly the right place and exactly the right time.
How confident would you be that you could train a dog and be sure it was always going to pull it at the right place?
I wouldn't.
This is where the whole thing broke down for the Russians. When they actually applied the plan, the dogs would run under the tank, then run back to their trainers, usually with the ticking bomb still attached to the harness. So it was back to the drawing board with one simple fix.
So what we have now is a trigger mechanism. When it goes under, this comes down, it detonates.
In training, it works perfectly. The problem is that the Russians just didn't think or smell like dogs.
A good way to put it is the dog sees the world through his nose.
The Russians made the mistake of training the dogs on their own tanks. And as it turns out, Russian tanks have their own unique smell.
The Russian tanks used diesel. When it came to deploying the bombs on the German tanks, they were gasoline. Of course, that's confusing.
From the dog's point of view, anything that smelled of gasoline clearly wasn't a tank. So the dog got confused. Having failed to find anything that smelled like a tank, the dog came back with his bomb and its automatic trigger. Even so, the dog bomb worked, sort of. At the Battle of Kursk in August 1943, dog bombs took out 12 German panzers, which left the Germans with only 2,488 in that battle alone. The Russians never recorded how many tanks they lost to French fur. Once bitten, twice shy. During the 1950s, weird warfare experts shrank their ambitions in the quest for the perfect weapons delivery system. It's small, it's deadly, it's an insect. Aedes aegypti is a deadly mosquito that carries yellow fever. Along with its malaria-carrying cousin, it has killed more people than all man-made weapons in history, which made the Americans wonder, could the Russians turn mosquitoes into a flying army of miniature syringes?
Nasty little insects, and certainly, weaponizing them could be something that would be useful to the military.
It's kind of biological warfare before biological warfare.
A third of all people bitten by the mosquito will die. That, in itself, is pretty compelling evidence.
You're going to drop giant collections of yellow fever mosquitoes on the enemy and hope that an outbreak of yellow fever will knock them dead.
But could the Russians really turn a mosquito into a weapon of mass destruction? The only way to find out was a live fire test. But the U.S. military wanted to keep this research a secret, so they tested it in their own backyard.
One of the things that stands out for me about Operation Big Buzz is that the U.S. tested it on Americans.
It is a fine spring day in May 1955. And the good citizens of Georgia are unaware that they are about to take part in one of the most fiendish mass experiments in the history of warfare. As the bombers drone overhead, nobody suspects that they are dispersing 330,000 mosquitoes across the state.
They weren't infected with yellow fever, so there was no real risk of an outbreak of disease, and the goal was to see how far the mosquitoes would spread.
The 330,000 bloodthirsty insects spread across an area of about half a square mile, attacking hundreds of hapless locals. Big Buzz proved that a biological attack using mosquitoes was possible. But to date, it has only ever been used by the U.S. military against its own people.
Yeah, I've lived in Georgia. Is that why the hell there's so many mosquitoes there today? No, I'm kind of pissed about that.
The problem with chicken mines, anti-tank dogs, and ships made of ice is that they're just too weird to work. But sometimes, just sometimes, the simplest of ideas can yield success. The following story is 100% true. It involves an unlikely hero emerging from the direst of circumstances. How do you call for help if you're surrounded and trapped in enemy territory? This was the question for the U.S. 77th, the Lost Battalion, trapped in a French forest during World War I. They are surrounded by the Germans, but no one knows that they're in trouble. With casualties mounting, they desperately need to get a message back to headquarters.
Communication is probably one of the most, if not the most important thing that you have to have on the battlefield.
During the First World War, communication on the battlefield was a very, very hard thing to do. Under normal circumstances, what they did was they strung wire communication, telephone wire.
But these are not normal circumstances. Their only hope for survival lies in the hands of a high-precision airborne delivery system. The Pigeon. Pigeons are born with an innate internal compass that lets them navigate the Earth's magnetic field.
This is done through special cells that contain tiny little magnets, and in the case of birds, these are either located in the brain or in part of the beak.
In World War I, pigeons were often used as couriers to send long-distance messages.
And of course, the Germans knew that these pigeons carried messages, and they became targets.
One by one, the winged warriors of the 77th get picked off by the Germans. Finally, just one is left, named Cher Ami, French for dear friend. Who sets off across the killing ground. Gets shot in the breast. Blinded in one eye. His leg hangs on by just the tendon. But he does not stop. Finally, Cher Ami staggers into U.S. Army headquarters. His message saves the Lost Battalion from destruction. Cher Ami is fitted with a wooden leg and declared a great American hero. He is sent stateside by U.S. General John J. Pershing, having saved the lives of 194 men.
There's something called the Dickens Medal, which is awarded to animals for bravery, and the animals that have been awarded the most Dickens Medals are pigeons.
With the advent of modern warfare, the battlefield was dominated by two key weapons: the tank and the airplane. For Weird Warriors, the next step seemed obvious.
The idea of a flying tank, you can almost see it. Aircraft are new, tanks are new, you breed the two together and you've got the ultimate weapon.
Of course, there's one fundamental problem. Tanks are heavy. Really heavy. They're also built like a brick. Planes, on the other hand, are designed to create lift.
Tanks are on the ground, aircraft are in the air. That's the way it should be.
But trivial details like this don't deter megalomaniac dictators. Enter Joseph Stalin. He knew that Hitler's powerful panzer divisions had overrun Europe and would soon overrun the Soviet Union. Stalin needs a superweapon, and fast. It's time to forget the laws of gravity. It's time to make a flying tank. Russia's aviation engineers go to work. The solution they come up with is ingenious. Take a tank, fit it with wings made of wood and fabric, and attach a long twin tail. Tow it into the air and let it glide its way to victory. It was called the A-40 Krylia Tanka, which is Russian for tank wing. In 1942, a prototype was built. Incredibly, as this photograph shows, it actually made it into the air. Genius! Well, not so much. Obviously, there was no getting away from the basic problem. So there had to be a few minor modifications to the intimidating tank.
Got rid of a lot of the firepower, got rid of a lot of the armor.
Which was a bit of a problem.
Actually, if you get rid of firepower, you get rid of armor, it's not a tank anymore.
If somebody tried to put me in a tank that had no armor on it and said that we were going to glide it onto the battlefield, I'd be like, are you out of your mind?
Just weeks after its maiden flight, someone in the Russian military spotted a fatal flaw. The A-40 Krylia Tanka was cancelled. So much for the flying tank.
I suppose life's very simple. You can have the flying, you can have the tank, you can't have both.
If you couldn't fly a tank and still rule the air, maybe you should try something else. By the late 1950s, jetpacks were all the rage, and it was every egghead's dream to emulate science fiction and get a man afloat. In 1956, the U.S. Navy achieved this with the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee Aerocycle.
An airborne platform seemed a perfect way to get a scout to cover a lot of ground where they could see a lot of things.
The VZ-1 was essentially a mini helicopter with a man standing on the blades. The two massive blades fan in opposite directions beneath the pilot's seat, creating lift, and it was steered by the pilot simply shifting his weight, a technique known as kinesthetic control. It's the same principle as riding a surfboard in midair. But even good riders tend to fall off surfboards.
If you fell off the platform, you're going to get chopped up by these counter-rotating propellers.
But that wasn't the real danger. The Army engineers